Good night. Thank you very much. Merci, Joseph. Thank you to all of you. It's my second time on the EPP Talks, and I think it's a great initiative. I was thinking about the future, but I think to think about the future we have to go back to the past. And this weekend I was reading Stefan Zweig, and how Stefan Zweig described what the world was the 50 years before 1914. An open world. A world where, at the time, you had like a single currency. It was the gold standard. People would travel with gold coins, if they wanted, in their pockets. Just Persia and China didn't have that single currency. The world was open. There was no passports on those days. And suddenly, everything went down. Suddenly, the populists and the extremists came and destroyed the world through ideas of protectionism. And a very interesting thing when you look at what the world was is that before the First World War, trade globally was more than 33% of the GDP of the world. And then it comes protectionism and the First World War. And then it comes more protectionism and the Second World War. And at the end of the Second World War, the global trade was barely 7% of the GDP. And what happened to the lives of people after those horrendous years? GDP went down by 14% during the First World War and 22% during the Second World War. So protectionism is not the answer to our problems of today. We have tested, and protectionism creates poverty and destroys the economy. So when you look into the future, you think, but so what's the solution? Because populists sell you the solution of protectionism, and that solution doesn't work. But people are not happy, and rightly so, they're not happy, because globalization as a whole has been very good for the very poor in very parts of the world where they were very poor, and they got to be less poor and get more than 1 billion people out of poverty. And the very, very rich, they got much richer than they were before. But you, us in this room, got worse after that. And the point that I wanted to raise today is that why that happened, why that part of the population in the Western world is worse off. And there's several explanations for that. But one is about the economy, is about productivity. What happened to productivity in the last 20 years? Productivity overall stagnated. So how can you get better lives for the people of Europe if productivity is not working? And the question is it really not working? Because it doesn't make sense. There's so much innovation, there's so much technology, the world looks so much better, and people are not getting better lives. And if you go to the nitty-gritty, what you see is that the very good companies, the frontier companies, those, they have been getting better. The productivity in manufacturing, in services, for the very good ones has been increasing. But for the whole part of all the rest of the companies, all the rest of society has stopped. And so the problem is not that we don't have innovation. The problem is there's no ideas. There's a lot of new ideas. The problem is that the productivity is stuck for the very few and is not coming as it used to go to the rest of the economy. And then we have to solve that. As a political party, we have to look at the future and think, what can we do about it for the productivity to go for everyone? I'm sorry about my mic, but it looks good, but I hear the sound. And so we have to think, what can we do for the future to solve that problem? Because the problem is that the diffusion of that productivity is stuck in the very good companies. And so you look at what's going on and you think, let's look at it in the demand side of the economy, on the supply side of the economy. Oh, thank you very much. Let's go to the economy and understand why productivity is not working. And if you go to the demand side of the economy, what you see is that finally digitalization, that seemed to be something that today you think is everywhere, if you go to the numbers, is not everywhere. Digitalization is in the ICT industry, is in the media industry, but that's 10% of the economy. The digitalization that we believe so much is not yet in health, in education, in government, in all the other parts of the economy. The good news is that we are at a tipping point for that to happen, and that's why I'm so hopeful, is that we are seeing that the internet is getting into those fields that was not before, that we're going from the internet of things to the internet of intelligent things. So we are at a tipping point of solving one of the problems of that productivity not be going to all the economy. But the problem is not there. The problem is on the supply side of the economy. And on the supply side of the economy, we have two big problems. One is investment. And when you look at how much do we invest, I was listening to the minister about defense, but what about research and science, which is the base of growth? It's 8% of the European budget. The difference between what we spend today, Horizon 2020 looks big, right? 80 billion euros. In the United States, just the National Institute of Health has the equivalent of 30 billion per year. So in 7 years, it's 210 billion just for health. So we have a huge gap to fill in between what others are investing in innovation and science and what we are investing in innovation and science. So the first thing is to make a choice for the next budget of the European Union. What do we want to be? Do we want to solve the problem of productivity? If yes, we have to invest more in innovation and science. And that's a choice for the countries. And they have to do it. The second point is about skills and disruptive ideas. Today, what you see is that innovation has changed so much, that innovation as it was, it's not the same. Innovation used to be something that was done by a producer and a company and would push that to a user, to the citizen. Today, innovation comes from the citizen and comes in the edges of disciplines. Last year, I was at the Nobel Prize ceremony, and I saw the beautiful thing of giving the Nobel Prize of Medicine to a Chinese woman that is not a medical specialist, so she's not even a doctor. And she cured millions of people because she discovered the cure for malaria. And the beautiful thing is that how she did it. She discovered the cure for malaria by reading a book with 2,000 years. By reading a poetry in that book that talked about a plant called Artemisia and how that plant could be extracted to cure malaria. What do I mean by that? I mean that we have to change our education system for people to be comfortable, not just at the core of disciplines, but at the edges of disciplines. And probably the best example we have is the example of Finland, where you have an education minister that a lot of you know, that is changing exactly that at the level of the secondary education. So it's not going to be more about just subjects of math or physics or sociology. It will be about looking at events and then going around the events in different disciplines. That will make people comfortable to be at the edges of disciplines. And that will make that diffusion of the productivity will go everywhere. It will not be stuck at the core of a discipline. And so I think that if we can kind of unlock these bottlenecks, we can have a better future. I just wanted to finish with a quote from a man that has been studying innovators for most of his life and wrote the biography of Steve Jobs. And he has a great book called The Innovators. And he has a quote, just to finish before our questions, where he says, "Innovation will come from people who are able to link beauty to engineering, humanity to technology, and poetry to processors. In other words, creators who can flourish where the arts intersect with the sciences. Walter Isaacson. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know you also have still another appointment. That's why I want to speedily move over to ask the audience if you have any questions. Please, the lady here in the front.
Thank you very much. I'm Vani Ivanova from Bulgaria, working here for 23 years on research, and before that in Germany also on research. And I believe in research and innovation, but also in science and science evidence for policies. I do understand what your problem is. We do have to do more with less. And I do not believe that budget is only money. It's about capabilities. And I want to ask you, are we going to do in research reforms at the level of high education? Because Norwegians always say the triangle between high education, innovation and research. That doesn't lead us nowhere if at high education we don't have enough scientific mindset.
Absolutely. I think that the problem with innovation is that it's an ecosystem like science. And so if you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle working, it doesn't work. And so you have to be in the secondary education, you have to be at the level of the research, you have to have in the universities, and you have to be in the companies. And if you don't have that ecosystem right, it doesn't work. And if you work in this field, you know that. And the problem with a lot of countries is that they think that just by solving one piece of the puzzle, they'll solve the problem. And the problem is much bigger than that. And I think that the way that we've been dealing in Europe is that we have to increase the budget, but we'll also do the reforms in terms of the labor market, in terms of the product market, in terms of the judicial system, so people can create companies and can feel comfortable in between companies and universities. And when you have that, when people feel comfortable in all these worlds, when someone from a company respects someone from a university as someone from a university respects someone from a company, then you create that ecosystem. And I think that that's the big challenge, is how do you create that ecosystem and that you put it right. In each country, it's very different. And so we have to work with different countries, and we, European Commission, have to be the resource for that countries to come to us and look at the best practices. And that's one of the things that we've been changing in these 2 years, is to create this unit that we have, that we just go to the countries, as we went to Bulgaria, and tell just what are the best practices, what do people do that can make the difference for science and innovation.
Yes, please, the gentleman over there.
Thank you. I'm Alberto Romagnoli of Rai Italian Television. I work on TV. This night we are looking at TV program, but there are no cameramans. Everything is made by robot. In the old television, there will be maybe 3 or 4 cameramen. So, for sure, my kids will not be cameramen because there are robots. But what about my colleagues that are in their 50s? What are your plans for the end of their career?
I think that you pose, your question is the question that we have been working harder, which is to think about artificial intelligence. And think about artificial intelligence is not just about the technology, it's about a political choice. And today the political choice that we have to make in terms of artificial intelligence and in terms of this world where machines can do what we do is the following. Do you want machines to replace you, or do you want machines to get you to be a better person and to do a better job? I think that the political choice of Europe should be that we want machines to get us to a better place, but not to replace us. And I think that machines can do the repetitive tasks. And just a couple of months ago in the United States, looked at this experience in the health sector, where you've put 7 radiologists, the best of the best, and a machine with deep learning looking at scans with cancer, with lung cancer. And the interesting thing was that the machine itself was 50% better than the doctor. And more than that, those very good doctors, in 7% of the cases, they missed that there was a cancer and the machine didn't. And so I called my radiologist and asked him, what do you think about it? You're going to lose your job. And he said, no, I think that I will have a better job because I don't have to be on that repetitive task of looking at a scanner. And I think that what this technology gives us is the ability of being more creative than we were before, creating professions that do not exist today. And I think that the challenge is that where you go from this world to a new world where you have professions that you don't even imagine exist. And that's why the importance of interdisciplinarity, the importance of putting people feeling good in the different disciplines is crucial, because the only way I can be good at a profession that will not exist, that is not yet there, is if I feel that I can be in the edges of the different disciplines. And that's why I was giving the example of Finland in terms of preparing these young people for that. But I'm a big believer that until we have problems, we have jobs. And the world has a lot of problems. So I think we're not going to run out of jobs. We just will have very different jobs from the past. So I'll give you my view, of course, is biased as someone that loves innovation, and I'm what you could call a techno-optimist. So still, I mean, take that as a discount to my answer, that I have a bias that is natural to my person. But I do believe in my bias. I do believe that we will find and create professions that will change the world and will be there to see it in the future. But I'm not that worried about the future. I'm more worried about the problems that we have that we cannot solve.
Thank you. We have here still one more request, and then I would like to conclude this debate because the Commissioner also has to leave us. Please.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth Scott-Wilson, serial intern, serial temp worker, and qualified jump hunter. I'd just like to ask, following my friend's question on automation, let's call it, most of Europe's jobs for young people are being taken over by robots, as he said, and also being outsourced to cheaper locations. So I would like to know how the innovation of Europe for the future views my generation of 20-plus-year-olds to 30-year-olds. Thank you.
First of all, I think that your generation is the solution for this part of the world. And when you look at the great things that I've seen in these 2 years and a half of your great generation creating companies at the age of 16, of 17 years old, all over Europe, it gives me a lot of hope. But your point is extremely valid, is that we are at the crossroads of that change. And you come, unfortunately, from a preparation or a generation that was prepared for a different world. And the world changed meanwhile. And so the question is, how do you prepare yourself, and how do people can help you, and a lot of people that I know that are in your position, to be in a world where today you don't just have a part of your life that you do your studies, you go to university and you just go to a job. Today you have a bridge in between university and the job for all your life. And you have to get back, and you go back to a job, and you get back to training. And I think that if you look at the countries that have the lowest unemployment rates, they are the ones that were able to do that. That bridge is always open, that people can always be retrained to the future. And I had the pleasure to meet Satya Nadella this year at Davos. And one of the things that he was saying about the jobs of the future is that 10 years ago, to have a job in technology, to have a job in this world, you would have to be a specialist of the digital world. Today, technology is at a point that everybody can work in the digital world. But we are still quite afraid of that world. So a lot of people kind of feel that they didn't or were not prepared at university for this type of world. And I think that's the challenge, how to prepare all the bracket of people like you to get into this digital world and to get to a world where jobs will be very different from the past. But still the problem is there, and it's up to us, not just the politicians, because the politicians can't do it alone, and the companies, to solve that. And I think that with a generation that is prepared to be in these different disciplines, that is prepared to find different jobs, to create companies, then I think that I have some hope for the future, better than it was my generation, that my parents just want me to go to a big company and work in a big company. Today, when I go back to the university where I was as a young student of engineering, no one wants to go to a big company, they want to create their own company. And I think that's a great thing. It's a great thing for the world, and so I wish you the best, and yeah, I wish that you'll be successful, and I know how hard it is, because I know a lot of people that are in the same position that you are, so I'm wholehearted with you.
Dear Commissioner, first of all, thank you very much for outlining your vision in this topic on, I guess, which we all agree this is, you know, something we have to invest more in the future. Of course, we also know that in the year to come, there will be very tough battles about the coming financial framework, starting from 2021, in which, well, the battles have always been hard. Nobody wants to pay more and nobody wants to get less. Plus, we have the additional complication with the UK leaving the EU. And leaving quite a hole financially, but nevertheless I hope that your voice is also going to be heard, that we need to spend money and we need to invest in this area if we want our economies to be fit for the future. Thank you very much, and a big applause.